Good morning, everybody. My name is Don Webster. I am the Director of e-business here at Business Decision North America. That practice primarily deals with our custom development aspects that we have in the organization. Java, SharePoint, and .NET are the primary technologies. So we're here today to discuss some differences between device channels in SharePoint and the responsive design approach in SharePoint as well. Talk about some pros and cons, see what may work best for your organization, and just give you some good stuff to think about as you go forward to looking at which method may be a best fit for you guys. So let's jump right into the first slide here, and we'll just go with a quick recap of responsive design. I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but just in case somebody's not, I thought I would cover it at a pretty high level. So responsive web design at the core relies on grid layouts, media queries, and CSS to alter the display of the website based on the width of the browser accessing that site. Depending on the number of widths targeted, via the queries, the website display can be made to differ greatly on large desktop screens down to tablets and mobile devices. So they render in a way that promotes good usability for your viewing audience. The main benefit of responsive is that no matter what the device width we have in question, the site will display in its most readable form to the user. Given the large number of devices that we already have with the varying widths that already exist, this is probably just going to keep growing in the future. Obviously, we've kind of gravitated towards some standards in the mobile space. We're kind of settling into the 4 to 6 inch range, so hopefully things will kind of stick there without getting too crazy on a lot of stuff. But with that approach, with the responsive approach, the method's pretty, or largely future-proof coming down the road, no matter what devices the manufacturers and the technology companies come up with. So of course, all that's well and good, but responsive doesn't come without its faults. The biggest drawback is what enables that SEO-friendly approach that it has today. The fact that all the HTML served up is exactly the same. So that means the images or sections may be hidden in the CSS, the resources are still being served to a device. And that's really not such an optimal approach when targeting low bandwidth mobile devices. Thankfully, those times are changing, but not everybody has access to LTE today or super high speeds on their mobile device. Over time, this will probably become less of a concern, but it is something to keep in mind today. And also it provides a less flexible approach to targeting a given device because you've got less options for modifying the display on that particular device since it's more based off of the size than anything else. In addition, responsive can be a little bit costly to implement because of tweaks and regressions that are going to be required throughout the life cycle of the product of the site when targeting different browser widths. So that type of work can consume a good percentage of developers' time if it's not managed properly. It's just something you need to keep in mind when you're making plans on which direction to choose. And we're going to jump over to device channels. So I'm not really much of a heavy detail on the slides, guy. I'll let you guys consume this for a minute. SharePoint 2013 provides a solution for displaying layouts for mobile devices. It's called device channels. You can set up these device channels to look for keywords in a browser's user agent string. And that's the mechanism the browser uses to identify itself to a web server. And SharePoint can apply an entirely different master page for every device channel that you have in the system. And you can create a device channel that looks for the keyword iPad and any browser that includes a string in the user agent that would have your device channel master page applied to it. And not only can you use device channels to swap out an entire master page, but you can also use something known as device channel panels inside master pages and page layouts to include or remove more specific parts of the page. So you've got a lot of flexibility when it comes to targeting these devices, and you'll see this kind of come out as we talk about that a little more. This really negates the main drawback of responsive designs, is that the HTML is served up in a manner that is completely optimized for that page and that device and that size. You're not doing extra load. The desktop version could be highly interactive and visual, and the mobile experiences could be really lightweight to improve performance tremendously. So there's a lot of advantages to performance in addition to the actual just content that you're going to serve up to the end user. It allows a lot of flexibility in the designs you can render to different devices. So rather than relying on just the same old HTML and grid-based setup, you have the opportunity to structure your HTML in any manner you want. So this is going to provide the capability for a lot more interactive experience. It's going to give you the opportunity to really do some excellent work in dashboarding for, say, a C-level executive of a division of an organization. And it's like I said, like we've been talking about, there's just a ton of flexibility in this approach for really giving the end user that you're after that really super rich experience that they're looking for on that mobile device. So disadvantage-wise, this approach, again, kind of mirrors the advantage of the responsive approaches. The search engines prefer HTML rendered at a given URL to be identical, so you're going to lose that SEO type thing. But that's only going to apply if you have a public-facing website. If you're internal, you don't care about SEO. So if this is not for public consumption, that's really kind of a concern that's off the table. There's also a limit to the number of devices that can be targeted, and that is still 10. I was hoping at some point they would update that to have more, because the situations have come up where we've needed more than 10. But to date, it has not. I would imagine that's going to be a SharePoint 2015 thing, not a SharePoint 2013 upgrade. And another drawback to the device channel approach is that it's even more limited when it comes to hosting public websites on Office 365. So only 2 device channels are currently available in 365. Hopefully they'll fix that. There's a default channel and a mobile catch-em-all channel. And so that's, if you've got a corporate standard on the iPad, you're probably okay in 365. If you've got a BYOD policy where you've got to target Android and different sizes of tablets that have different types of browsers, WebKit, you want to make sure you hit a lot of different things in there, then you are going to be in a little bit more trouble in Office 365 from the flexibility and technology standpoint. You can still work around some of it, but it's going to be tougher to do without those extra device channels. Jumping over to the next slide. So this is kind of a general comparison between the two, just from a high level. I've got some more stuff to add to this here, just for talking through it. So device management uses, like I said earlier, identity of the browser on a particular device to decide which presentation to use. So when that query comes in across the wire from a mobile device, SharePoint's going to look at that, say, I see you're using an iPad, and I've got a device channel for an iPad, and here's your content, here's your master page, and we're good to go. So different HTML for every channel translates to more work and more management for you on the development side, but overall a better experience. So nothing comes for free, right? You guys know that as well as anybody when it comes to the development side. It's only going to be as good as what you put into it. And while it will be more, it will be worth the extra effort because you'll get that much more customized and rich experience for the user. We'll always load the same experience for the same device every time, regardless of the browser window size for the device channel. That could be a problem if we you got the iPad mini now, and you got the regular iPad. If they did an iPad mini or something like that, you'd probably have to tweak how you're doing your device channels, maybe on the detection of the user agent strings, depending on what they're putting in there. So you'll have to obviously pay attention to the marketplace to see what's coming down and how that's going to affect what you've built today and how things are going to roll in the future. Depending on how many different devices your site visitors are going to use, managing those devices and experience can become complex, and it's only likely to grow, right, as things go. I mean, we've got desktop today, tablet, phone, and sadly, it looks like we're going to get browsers on a watch here in the next couple of years, most likely. I can't imagine anybody wanting to browse the web on their watch, but it's probably going to happen. And heck, who knows? Maybe you're going to be designing for the corneal implant display device in 10 years. It's impossible to know where technology is going to take us. So that's why the blanket responsive design approach is a lot more future-proof than the device channel approach. But we'll just have to kind of roll with the punches depending on what kind of devices and technology we get served up in the future. So you can serve different content to different devices. Now, this is a pretty cool thing. So you're going to be able to really tailor that experience, whereas the responsive, not so much, right? So iPad mini, an Android tablet, a Galaxy Tab 3, all these things can actually be targeted because Apple's resolutions are pretty consistent, but Android tablets are not. They're all over the place. Budget tablets have a low-res screen that aren't very good. The really nice Android tablets have a high-res screen. A lot of them are 1080p or even more, on how those things are rendering. So you're going to have more management to do, but you're going to be able to really tailor content to a device if it's applicable to the organization and the business unit you're dealing with at the end of the day. So more flexibility in controlling the markup of that website for different devices, another benefit, right, just on that experience piece. Additional optimizations are going to be possible to the website, such as resizing image and video server side and using the renditions capability, which further improves performance and user experience of the website. So being able to offload a lot of this stuff to the server before it's served up through the device channel is a big deal for performance, or at least it can be, depending on what you're trying to send out there to your audience. Now, on the responsive design standpoint, right, instead of device management, it's properties management. So it's really the screen size. The same HTML for every device, less work, less hassle, but less customized experience. Responsive web design is, going to cause different experiences to be loaded depending on the size of the browser. So, again, this comes into a lot of play with a lot of the Android devices where there's a very big divergence, so your responsive stuff may not be optimal in a lot of cases. And going back on the user agent string, that can be a problem for you because there are people out there that like to change their user agent strings because they can. Some people tell IE to act like Firefox and tell Firefox to act like IE, and some people tell their WebKit version to act like Safari. I mean, people do kind of crazy things on their tablets to do stuff, so that can really cause problems from a tech support standpoint or just a development support standpoint for you in the future if people are actually, if you have a BYOD policy and they're bringing in their tablets and they're like, man, this doesn't look right, what's wrong with this? And then, it could take a little bit of investigation to figure out what's going on there to see why, then show them. They're like, well, I need that for something else. So then you've got a problem, right? So you'll have to work through those possible issues as they come up. Responsive design really only changes the presentation layer of the website. Although you can hide pieces of the browser using CSS, like we said earlier, it's all still present in the website code and it's therefore loaded, and depending on the design can degrade performance significantly. So if you're very image heavy and if you've got an embedded video that plays when the people go to the website, that's a bad idea in general, but if you had to do that for some executive thing or some type of a mandate within your organization, and you're hiding that video on a phone, it's still going to play, or it's still going to have to load those assets up there. So that's going to cause some problems from the performance side. So you've got to design accordingly if you're going to go with responsive. Same content is served using responsive design. So you don't have the opportunity to really tailor the content like you do in the device channels. It's going to be much less customized experience depending on the audience, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, because you may not need that customization from the device channels, but if you do, going responsive is going to cause a little dent in that strategy. So public-facing SharePoint sites, now, as we mentioned earlier, responsive design gives you that SEO-friendly approach. Same HTML, every device, sufficient, for an internet search engine, such as the Googlebot, to index the content once, and you'll be sure that those search results will apply to every query coming out of your device. So those are just some of the comparison pieces between the two. I guess the really simple way to sum this up is kind of a marketing analogy. If you send out an email blast and you just target everybody with a new widget you're trying to sell for a website, then everyone's going to get it. You're not really sure if that person cares about that widget or if they had bought something from you before, because you're targeting everybody. On the device channel side, it's more like targeted marketing. Somebody's coming into your restaurant, they come in 3 to 4 times a month, they order red wine with chicken Kiev, and you know what they like, right? So if you're targeting that person, you can market to them directly, saying, hey, I've got a sweet new chicken dish, I think you should try it out. They like chicken, they like wine, offer them a deal. And so that type of marketing is much more effective, and so that device channel experience can be much more effective to the end user if it's applicable to the situation within the organization. All right, next slide coming up. We're going to do a little bit of discussion about best options. So obviously, as on the slide states here, there isn't really a best practices on this, and there probably never will be, because it's going to be different for everybody. There's advantages and disadvantages to both sides. If you're dealing with, like a design company, to provide a site design to you because you don't have that UI skill set in the house, particularly if the process happens before a SharePoint development team gets involved. The decision may already be made for you. It's common for design companies to provide completely different HTML templates for standard sites and mobile optimized sites and immediately lend itself towards device channels. So it could be more cost effective to receive one responsive design from a design company rather than the multiple device targeted designs that are going to impact that decision, especially from the cost standpoint. If you're dealing with a team that will be responsible for both the design and implementation, then the decision may come down to the flexibility required for the site design. And, weighing up the approaches outlined above to choose the one that best suits the goal of the site. So it's going back to that comparison list and looking at the pros and cons of each approach and then seeing what makes the most sense. So the hybrid approach of these two technologies is probably a better way forward. There is an option available which provides the best of both worlds to us and is particularly appropriate when hosting public sites in Office 365. So this really involves utilizing the device channels to target particular devices, but ensuring the designs within them, or at least on the smaller device side, I guess I should say, are responsive for the different browser which are going to be encountered at some point in the future. It may not be the most cost-effective approach available, but it would definitely be the most effective from a user experience point of view. So looking at that holistically, right, you look at how can I can target device channels and then make those device channel designs responsive, so you're going to be able to get that better experience across the devices. Again, like I said, a little more cost prohibitive, but definitely going to be a lot better blanket coverage of what's going on within the site and how it's being rendered. The nice thing about the device channels is that you don't have to really decide between them in responsive design. You can certainly use both techniques on your SharePoint site, but you really have to manage them slightly different since device channels are configured in SharePoint site settings, and responsive uses media queries and CSS3 style sheets. If you want to use those device channels by themselves without responsive, I've got a few things for you to consider. So device channels could and likely will require more assets to manage. If you're using device channels to swap out an entire master page, you need to manage 2 or more master pages. And if you're going to use up to the maximum of 10 device channels, now you're managing, 10 or 11 master pages. So master pages can be complicated. So unless you have a specific need or you're really good at this master page stuff, it's usually a better approach to use the device channel panels to just render parts of the UI and change parts of the UI rather than an entire master page. Now that's obviously going to depend on your usage scenario and what makes the most sense and where you feel comfortable doing that, but doing the device channel panel approach is going to probably alleviate a lot of headaches from a development perspective, and it's also going to make management easier down the road because now you're dealing with, let's say, 2 or 3 master pages versus 9. So obviously a lot less to keep up with there and a lot less to maintain and worry about, and bug fixes and troubleshooting, all the things that go along with what we do. Device channels do rely on those user agent strings like we mentioned before. This is great if you can target devices specifically from their user agent string, but at times can be limiting. There are many varieties of, I mentioned earlier, Android cell phones and tablets, and many times the user agent string does not declare the screen size. So in these cases, media queries on the CSS side can be more useful in targeting browser features like this. So, the point to take away from that is that it's going to depend on what you've got in the organization. What do you have to support as a developer, as a designer, as a manager when it comes to the mobile experience on SharePoint? That's what's going to really make or break how you approach the solution to these problems on the mobile side. The device channels require a publishing feature to be enabled in SharePoint. You can't do this on a team site. So you can't do this on SharePoint Foundation. If you're using Foundation, you're pretty much stuck. You've got nothing but responsive as your only tool in the toolkit. And again, it can be a negative that this feature is only available in the full SharePoint and as a publishing site. So if your farm is not configured as a publishing site, or those features are not turned on and you're not going to get them turned on, you will not get to use device channels. It's pretty much just cut and dry. Depending on the SharePoint environment and the administrators in question, a lot of times site guys, site owners, with simple team sites and it's more of an information portal or it's just more of a workspace, you don't have all those things turned on. So you could have an uphill fight in the organizations perhaps to make those things happen. So that's just something to be aware of, that there are limitations to what can use device channels or how you can actually get those features working. So, and as we mentioned before, device channels are limited to 10. And I haven't really hit anything in the past that's made me worry too much about that. But with the rapid proliferation of devices that are in the marketplace today and the continuing escalation of that, and everything seems to be going mobile, it's so fast it's making our head spin. That could be a problem if it applies to a BYOD organization with a lot of varying technologies. Just something to keep in mind, that you may hit a bump in the road if you've got to support a lot of devices. Now, I think that eventually this will be eliminated, but unfortunately, I think it's going to be a SharePoint 2015 feature, and hopefully they'll go like they've gone with list support and such in SharePoint, where it went from a couple thousand records, a few years ago to like now you can go into the millions of records before the performance starts to degrade. So hopefully they'll go, yeah, you've got 50 device channels now or 100 device channels, and while that might end up being a management nightmare, it'll give you the flexibility to do what you need to do within the organization to provide the right content and experience back to the users. So that's about all I had today for all of the bullet points here. We've got about 8 minutes left for questions. I'll just toss up some contact information here. Happy to answer any questions. If you have anything that I did not cover today, you can do LinkedIn or email if you like to. So what I'll do is I'll just leave it open here, see if any questions come in. I don't think we have any yet. Let me double check. And nothing yet, so I'll just kind of hang out here for the next 8 minutes, and if anything pops up, we'll answer these questions. But thank you for your time today. Appreciate you joining, and again, if you have any further questions, feel free to contact me directly at any time. Thanks again.